Sponsor.
Good evening. Silent majority are covering cousin marriages today, or more the precise term is consanguineous marriages. Have I said that right?
Yeah, consanguineous.
Consanguineous marriages. And essentially that means related relationships, blood-related relationships. The reason we're covering cousin marriages is because in the UK up until now, cousin marriages, at least we thought, wasn't a common occurrence. But when the bill is currently at Parliament, I think it's past the first reading, and it was instigated by an MP called Richard Holden in Essex. I'm not sure how big a community there is in Essex that are partaking in cousin marriages. Nonetheless, he's the guy that levied it. And I acknowledge that it happens across the world. It happens in the Middle East and in the Indian subcontinent primarily. But one can imply that because the legislation has been introduced in this country, there must be a problem within this country as well. So which is why we're addressing it, just to see how big the problem is. And we're going to explore the sort of side effects and understand why it is that from the Middle East and primarily the Indian subcontinent, why it's been transported over. I have with me an esteemed guest, Brother Hassan. I'll be calling him Hassan, but a very esteemed guest and a very notable and proud Tory member. He's given several speeches at Tory conferences. He's been a guest at the sort of notorious GB News. He's also had various dialogues with high-level academics. And what sort of piqued our interest about Brother Hassan is that he actually wrote an article that you can find in our bio around supporting the banning of cousin marriages in this country. And that, if you want to read the article, it's very well read and very, very interesting points made on why he supports it and why he's a key proponent of it. It's in the bio of our YouTube link. Please click on that and read it if you wish to. So Brother Hassan, the only reason he sort of delved into this particular topic of cousin marriages, he has no particular interest of it, is because when this MP from Essex, Richard Holden, did propose this legislation or law to come in place, there was a lot of people coming out rejecting it and saying this is Islamophobic, this is targeting certain communities, which is why he said, hang on. Brother Hassan said, hang on, no, it's not Islamophobic and it's not targeting certain communities. He looked at it from a factual, objective point of view. And I'll be picking his brains regarding those matters. Just another thing, Brother Hassan kindly gifted me this book. It's called BAME, Breaking Through Barriers. And again, it says what it is. So he's a very profound author, and a lot of academics from Oxford University and further afield have referenced his work. So I haven't got a layman here with me today, not to mention a posh boy. Obviously, you probably got that from being a Tory member. Thank you very much, Brother Hassan, for joining us. I'd like to thank my main sponsor, Ahyan Estate. If you're a landlord or a tenant, please reach out to them. They're loyal, they have affordable prices, and they'll take care of you. Now, without further ado, cousin marriage is a sticky point, right? And I just want to start off to say that, yes, in British culture, regardless of what ethnicity you're from, you can ridicule it and deride it. And just to hone that point through, you know, in British schools, regardless of what ethnicity you are, if there was a kid in that school that said, oh, my parents are cousins, that kid will be bullied. In British schools, regardless of ethnicity. So in the most respectful way, in British culture, it's a strange thing. I don't want to use any other stronger terms because it might be offensive. But however, it is prevalent in the UK, and you have a lot to say about that. I want to start you off, Brother Hassan. Why does the UK feel the need to outlaw cousin marriages? How big of a problem is it?
Well, thank you very, very much indeed, Brother Oli. And first of all, before I answer your question, congratulations on your Silent Majority podcast.
Thank
I've
you.
been watching it for the last few weeks. It's a very, very intelligent podcast with some very intelligent guests. So congratulations. And I hope all of us can support this. I want to see this grow from strength to strength. So how much of a problem is this? So in the United Kingdom, most of the cousin marriages are from the are Pakistani community. So 60% of marriages within that community is cousin marriages. You and I, we're from the Bangladeshi community, so obviously this is not a disparagement, one community versus another, because essentially we are one Muslim community.
Absolutely,
so it's
yeah.
really a family discussion. But that's not to say that cousin marriages has also been an issue in Bangladesh before, but that is rapidly declining, I'm happy to say. So 60% of marriages within the Pakistani community is cousin marriages. So that's what the statistics are.
Staggering, 60%.
60%. But there is variation according to the regions. So if we go up to the Bradford area, it is close to 90%. And if we look at why is it 90%, it's because a lot of that community has come from an area of Pakistan, because the rate in Pakistan is also 60+%. Cousin marriage is the highest in all the Muslim world. But you go to the provinces, the village areas, they do go up to 80+%. So there's been some transplantation, you could say, from there to Bradford. So it is a problem, and the reason why I am supporting Richard Holden's bill to get this banned is because, well, there are many factors. But one of them is the rate of birth defects that are there. The statistics do bear that out. And I myself have seen, anecdotally, families who've had children who are affected by this. Not great for the children, and it's absolutely heart-wrenching for the families. So this is one issue, and this also relates to the tribalistic behaviours, the approach. Forced marriages can also play a part in all of this. So by banning this, it's hopefully going to reduce the amount of forced marriages and also the birth defects that we would see from cousin marriages.
Thank you very much, Hassan. I think we'll get to the circumventing and how the efficacy, should this be passed and outlawed. In terms of just the Bradford, it's a staggering number, 90%. You're the man of the statistics. Can you just tell me, and it's primarily in the Muslim world, so we've got the Middle East and the Indian subcontinent, and Middle East including North Africa, which is an Arab extension. Just quickly, from the top of your head, what are the statistics in those countries?
Right, so I'm not sure about the other parts of Africa, but in Morocco, it has the lowest incidence in the Muslim world, at 15%. Then goes up to 25% in Turkey, then Afghanistan, Iran, so close to 50%. Saudi Arabia, over 50%, and Pakistan has the highest at 60%. As I said before, 80% in the provinces. And Bangladesh, around about 17%. It is declining, I praise be to my parents who when they were looking for spouses for me and my sister over about nearly 2 decades ago, the relatives did not appear on the radar. So I really bless them, make dua for them as well. Thank God I didn't have to deal with that. But anyway, coming back to your question, those are the statistics. You said that, this does happen a lot in the Muslim world. It shouldn't do. Because although the Prophet, under Islamic law, it is allowed.
Yep.
And the Prophet did allow the marriage between Ali and Fatima, peace be upon them. He himself, out of the 9 wives, he had 2 wives who were her cousins. That's fine, it is allowed. But there is a trajectory, there is advice he gave, which is to marry spouses who are not related. He said that in 2 places, but they are classed as weak hadiths because the chain of narration is questioned. But having said that, when we look at the different religions, Christianity, Judaism, so in the Bible, you do have cousin marriages, so there is biblical precedence. So for example, Jacob married his 2 cousins, Jacob alayhi salam, Leah and Rebecca. Esau, who was the son of Isaac alayhi salam, married Mahalath, who's the daughter of Ishmael alayhi salam. So there is biblical precedence, but the Catholic Church, they actually banned it according to ecclesiastical law. So some Catholics can marry cousins if there's papal dispensation. Okay. The Anglican Church, when King Henry VIII split from the Catholicism, he wanted to marry Catherine of Howard, his first cousin. Right. So obviously there was precedent in the Anglican Church. Hinduism, it's mixed in Hinduism. So India, I forgot to mention India as part of the stats. In the northern region, it is rare. In the southern region, it's around about 30 to 40%, and these are the Hindu communities, right? So this is not isolating and targeting the Pakistani Muslim community. Other communities are affected as well. So in Hinduism, it's mixed. So Krishna married two cousins, so Bindra and Mitravinda. So two cousins, and Budayana, who is an ancient Hindu scholar, he allowed cousin marriages. The Vedic Shastras, they actually ban it. Okay, Buddhism is open. Prince Siddhartha, before he became the Buddha, he married Princess Yasodhara. Okay, Sikhism, I think, is silent on the matter. It doesn't say anything in the Guru Granth. But Islam is so interesting. Okay, because the Prophet actually made the connection, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, between having weak children and marrying relatives, right? If you extrapolate that to the 10th and 11th century, to Al-Ghazali, I think in the 11th century, he said that to marry strangers, so, otherwise your desire would reduce if you were to marry relatives. On top of that, you've got Ibn Qadamah, in his book Al-Mughni. He lived in, I think, in the 11th, 12th century. He actually said that he made the link between relative marriages, kin marriages, and intelligence, right? So you can have less intelligent children, and it is therefore, so this is what he said, and it is therefore said, if you marry relatives, you can have weak children. And that's relating to that weak hadith the Prophet said. So there is precedence here in Islam of a link between kin marriages and birth defects. So the thing about intelligence I just mentioned, that's about 12th century. About 800 years later, there have been studies to show a correlation between consanguineous marriages and IQ. So there was an Israeli study that was done in 2014 by an Israeli Muslim, Hassan Abu Saad. He looked at over 220 people in the Negev desert in Israel, the Bedouin Arabs. Roughly 61% of them who had IDD, that's intellectual disability development or development disability, 61% of IDD children were from cousin marriages. So what was hypothesized in the 12th century and linked to the weak hadith of the Prophet was confirmed, alayhi by that study and other studies as well in the 20th, 21st century. Okay, so if anything, the ban will actually be in congruence and it'll converge with the ethos of Islam.
Very comprehensive. I think you gave a comprehensive answer across all religions. I do want to add to that. Obviously, I think this is common knowledge now, the propensity of, it's not actually grounded as in the propensity of having, if cousins were to get married, the propensity of having a defect in that child is higher than ordinarily it would be with two strangers or people that aren't related to get married. Just quickly tell me, because we had this conversation offline. So Saudi Arabia, for instance, and Pakistan, they have the highest number of cousin marriages. How do they police that? Because if it is 60% respectively in both of those countries, there must be a way the government circumvent the defects of genes. What do they do?
Well, because cousin marriages are legal, there's no need to circumvent. They just have to do genetic testing. That's mandatory in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, but unfortunately, that hasn't really deterred. And incidentally, Iqbal Mohammed, the ex-Labour MP, now independent MP, when he responded to Richard Holden in Parliament, he also advocated for testing and education. He did not agree with the ban. I think their education is important. In terms of circumventing, so if the ban were in place, I think what you're implying is that people could still circumvent that, probably go outside, get married, and come back. Policing will be very difficult, but it doesn't mean that you don't ban it. Banning will send a message that forced marriages is not allowed. There's a link there, by the way, between forced marriage and cousin marriages. And if I draw an analogy there, let's take female genital mutilation. That is banned. Should we legalize it? because some people will circumvent it, go out probably to the Middle East, cut up the daughter and come back. Of course not. It is a deterrent, or it has to be a deterrent. It'll make it more difficult to do that. And also in terms of policing, if communities know that this is about to happen, FGM, I don't know, cousin marriages or whatever, you would report that.
We'll go into how to further police this. And I think a case in point here is that you said that both Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have genetic testing, which is one way, because ultimately the bottom line is it's not haram, right? The Prophet, peace be upon him, there's a weak hadith, and then you've got, the prominent Imam Ghazali and so on and so forth, saying that yes, there potentially can be genetic defects, and then the intellectual argument to it. I want to bring it closer to home now. So I was speaking to a friend of mine actually today, and we were catching up, and I said, they said, what are you doing this evening? I'm actually shooting cousin marriages. And they were like, what? And I said, what? And funnily enough, remarkably, they said coincidentally, they were speaking to someone, a Pakistani boy, I'm not sure, I didn't go into it, but a Pakistani guy from Bradford, and he was casually saying that his mum and dad are cousins.
Yeah.
He knows of a family whereby 6 brothers are married to 6 sisters. So they're cousins, right? And 6. It's a bit of a.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, mind-boggling. Yeah. So 6 cousins, 6 brothers are married to 6 sisters, and they're all cousins. Now, I did, without prolonging the conversation with them, I did ask them, just tell me what the rationale of that boy that you were speaking to. What's his rationale? Because he thought it was the norm. It's nothing. It wasn't a taboo. It wasn't, he wasn't outraged or anything. He just thought it was a normal thing to do, perhaps up north. And the response...
Hence the 90%.
Hence the 90%. The response he gave is, particularly within the Pakistani community, that the first one, and again, I think this is a noble reason, I'm not justifying anything, is that it's one way to protect their daughters or their females. If they marry them off to family members, there is almost some kind of ironclad guarantee that that man, which is also a family member, first cousin, will treat them right. The second one is the trust issue. And it's perhaps down to generational wealth or passing down wealth. If technically, if you were to marry someone that isn't your cousin, you're spreading the wealth, or you're making the wealth a bit more depleted, if that makes sense. So they're the two things. So that leads me on to...
But these are the wrong reasons for marrying.
We'll get that. We'll get to that. I want to first understand the rationale behind why, primarily in the Indian subcontinent and in the Middle East, what's its genesis? What's its inception? Why was it that so many countries and so many cultures adopted this cousin marriages? And I'll just give you 2 or 3 key headers. One is that you and I were brothers, or were friends, or rather brothers. And I've said the moment this is the thing I missed out as well. So this Pakistani boy also said, the moment he was born, his parents earmarked him for his cousin, and they're married now. So he's married to his cousin as well. So one of the examples, one of the themes would be that we are brothers, and I've promised you that I will marry my daughter off to you. That's one of the reasons that they do it, because there's an oath between brothers. Secondly, it's the thing that I've mentioned, the trust issue and protecting their women folk. And also, and this obviously relates back to many centuries of the economic advancement of families. If I'm a pretty girl in a third world country, and I've got a British cousin who's a counterpart that lives in Britain, and my dad says, if you marry your cousin, we become wealthier. We come out of poverty. So there's so many reasons, but I just want to pick your brain in the rationale, because you can disagree with it. I agree with that. You can do that's your prerogative, but it's happened over centuries, arguably, and there has been rationale to it. So why is it that people do it?
Well, it has. I think initially it was survival. And in fact, it did happen. It's fairly common in the centuries. And I think Richard Dawkins, he did mention, I think in his book, An Ancestor's Tale, a pilgrimage to the dawn of life. He mentioned that here you take one person with 2 parents. Each parent has 2 parents. When you span backwards this tree, the number of parents should increase. So the population should increase, but actually decreases as you go back in time. Why? Because of cousin marriages. So there is truth in that statement, that it was fairly common. At that time, it would have been survival. So there's one advantage there. And you've mentioned a few points here. So treat the women right. I think there's absolute poppycock. There's no reason. Treatment of the family members will be based on the values that you hold, whether religion, values, etc. It's not based on cousin marriages at all. And if you're talking about treating people right, you're certainly not treating your children right if they do get birth defects. And I've seen harrowing cases of this. It talked about oath between brothers, and I think this is it goes to this tribalistic approach, which is absolute nonsense. There should not be an oath. There should be an element of choice from an Islamic point of view. Yes, of course, listen to your parents. You don't want to rebel. But there is no Islamic precedence to have an oath to marry a cousin. 85% of British Pakistanis, and I'm sure similar would be for Bengalis as well and other Muslim communities, 85% of people would prefer to choose their own marriage partners. Only 8% would want their parents to make that decision. So if 85% want to choose their own partners, yet you have over 60% of children who have been put into cousin marriages, there is an element of pressure here. I use the term forced marriages. I use that lightly because it's very difficult to distinguish between forced marriages and pressure. Okay, but they are related to each other. So this oath between brothers is absolute nonsense. It's more of a sort of gang mentality. You talk about economics. Well, interestingly enough, in the 19th century, some of the American states banned cousin marriages, and they noticed that the economic circumstances improved. The economy has actually improved. And in China, in 1980, they banned cousin marriages. Again, they've noticed notable increase in economy. Now, there is a correlation. I'm not sure about causation. I have to look into this further. But one would assume it's because of increased productivity, because you're having less people who can't work. That increases productivity. So when you talk about economics, I think the facts do contradict that idea. But keeping you marry a cousin because you want to keep properties in, you don't want outsiders to come in. You really think that is worth sacrificing the well-being of your children?
Beautifully put. I do want to latch onto the causation, or rather, you used it loosely. I think there is a correlation between forced marriages and cousin marriages. And I'm hoping the statistic isn't glaring, but equally at the same time, from the economic perspective, I'm fully with you of the fact that economically, various studies and shows that usually royalty marry royalty. Obviously, there was that ancestral nature prior, in the 50s and hundreds of years back. But in terms of the economic advantage, I used an example of a pretty cousin back home with a British counterpart in Britain. And if that father, regardless of what the daughter thinks, the father tells the daughter, forget you having a choice and having a fairy tale, running off into the sunset. If you marry your cousin, we come out of poverty. So I'm trying to rationalize here and try to understand why some people choose the cousin marriage route.
I would challenge that, come out of poverty. So if the families are in the same economic circumstance.
No, if they're not. If
oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, equally can find, guys who are from different families, different tribes who are prosperous, So the poverty argument doesn't really apply here. So if you're forcing your daughter, forcing is clearly not allowed in Islam. But again, I come back to our religious foundations here. It's clearly not allowed. You cannot force. And I think the Quran, forgot which verse, it does mention you cannot marry off your daughters against their will. It's clear cut. So I think what we're seeing now is a disparity, a divergence between culture and religious principles. And it is unfortunate that, for example, we have imams who are the centers of our community in mosques. So they haven't really said much about cousin marriages, or even, related to this are the grooming gangs. And good podcast, by the way, last time you had. That imam you had, unfortunately, it was the biggest example of divergence or blaming others, which I've ever seen, which I think was reprehensible. Blame the people who committed the crime in the first place. So again, I've challenged imams, not just about cousin marriages, grooming gangs, forced marriages as well. I haven't heard many talk about these in the khutbahs, and they are the centres of our community. So I would push back and invite them. Look, you have to give guidance, based on Islamic principles, obviously, but call it out, because if you don't call it out, we're very happy to criticise British culture. So you had that brother on from Imperial College.
Yeah.
Again, a good podcast, very intelligent brother, very anti-British, you can say. But I understand where it's coming from. So we would have no problems if we have, if we find things that are very questionable in British culture, we'll call it out. Yeah, I would say that this contradicts our Islamic principles. We're quite happy to have that freedom of speech. But what happens now if there's a contradiction between our religious principles and our home cultures, cultures that our parents belong to? Where has that freedom of speech gone? Why are we silent about it? So grooming gangs, honour killings, forced marriages linked with cousin marriages, abortion. We're meant to be a pro-life community. I'm ardently pro-life. We've paid lip service to this, which I think is absolutely scandalous. So these are the things I would advise, imams to actually talk about this during their khutbahs. How did we come onto this?
It was to do with what was the initial argument? I think it was the economic reasons, and you sort of went to essentially people turning a blind eye.
Yeah, people turning blind eye.
Just a statement, just my guess as an imam. I'm with the sentiment. I'm for the sentiment that you're saying. We should call it out. And with that particular conversation, if the audience haven't watched it on grooming gangs, I think it was a fascinating conversation. And in my opinion, I respect the stance the imam took. But equally, a lot of audience members, including yourself, have said that he looked at societal causes as opposed to the culprits and the perpetrators. So
absolutely,
respectfully, I'm with your sentiment, but equally, I agree with the societal things that the imam has said. Maybe he didn't touch on the individual sort of community issue that we have. And I'll give him the feedback, and other people have given that feedback. But yes, I think I agree with the sentiment that we need to call it out. And imams generally have responsibility as leaders or pillars of the community to call it out when they see wrong. Otherwise, you got other communities that will rebel and say, "Oh," and essentially we're doing ourselves more harm, and we'll be further marginalised as an alien community.
Harm in what sense?
In the sense that if we go back to the grooming gang or the cousin marriages and other communities, whether it's the British communities and other communities, look at us and think, well, we're backwards and so on and so forth. And that affects integration. I want to bring it back to the 21st century. Despite the statistics in the Middle Eastern and the Indian subcontinent, clearly the 90% in Bradford and the neighbouring counties and areas, and the British government considering introducing this as a ban. And I think you're right. It will act as a deterrent. Yes, in terms of policing, I will go on to this after this. But I do want to understand, in 21st century Britain, whereas regardless of your colour and your religion, we have a common understanding and morals and values primarily. And I use the basic example. Any child goes to school and says to his peers or the children in that school, more so secondary school, because teenagers are evil. They're vicious without really thinking. They have no compassion. If one kid went to tell another kid or a class brazenly, "Oh, my parents are cousins," that kid would get bullied. So essentially, we have a common understanding that it's strange in this country.
I mean, I haven't heard of any cases. You did mention this again offline. But if that is the case, any sort of bullying should not be allowed. I mean, there's some who may, trans, this has been a debate about trans, changing the gender, homosexuality, etc. Although we may disagree with that, we still respect people. There should be no bullying whatsoever, whether it's, parents with cousin marriages or other facets we just mentioned.
The point I'm trying to make is any sort of change, subtle change, that kid, regardless of what it is that he's liable, he's open to, he's vulnerable to, he's susceptible to it. So the point I'm making is, if within British culture, or regardless of your race and creed, if it's strange here, why does it still happen here?
Well, maybe it will be strange to the contemporary British society, the host communities, the English communities.
But it's strange to you and I as well, because
because we're Bangladeshis, the incidence has declined. It's up 17% in Bangladesh. So luckily, alhamdulillah, our parents did not force me and my sister. And inshallah, hope when you find your wife, your parents won't force you to marry a cousin. So strange to the British community, strange to us. But I think you answered the question earlier on. For someone in Bradford, you had 6 brothers, 6 cousin sisters. It's natural to them because where they're from, or their parents are from, especially in the provincial areas, it is the norm. But unfortunately, what is also becoming the norm are birth defects. So it's about education. And that's what's going to...
Can you just mention the common sort of birth defects that are common amongst these, if you know them from the top?
So cystic fibrosis, cystic fibrosis, cerebral palsy, beta thalassemia. I'm not a doctor, by the way, so I'm using these medical terms. Haemophilia as well. And do you know who discovered the hereditary trait of haemophilia? It was a Muslim scientist way back in the 12th century. I think I've got it was Abul Qasim al-Zahrawi, or he's known as Abul Qasis in the West, and he discovered the hereditary nature of haemophilia. Again, another Muslim scholar I've mentioned, a historical scholar, whose hypothesis has been confirmed in modern science. And also there was a Jewish scholar, Judah Halevi. He was born and he was brought up in Muslim Spain. And he also, I think, is the first person in history to come up with he noticed the genetic hereditary traits of dominant genes and recessive genes. So, we have lots to, as I say, I think Islam is certainly an outlier when compared to other religions, other philosophies, in actually providing a trajectory towards marrying outside the family, and for some reason we're doing the exact opposite.
So we foresaw it, yet we're contradicting ourselves.
Yeah, and this reminds me of a hadith saying of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that Islam came as a strange religion and it will return as a strange religion. So imagine if your daughter or your son says, look, I like this lady, I like this girl, she's from, let's say she's African or she's white. We can imagine what sort of consternation there'll be. There'll be a storm. Racism is quite rampant when it comes to these things. Yep. Yet Islam is very strict on having this egalitarian approach, bringing races together. And you might have seen from some of my speeches to the Tory conference, I quoted my favorite verse, chapter 49, verse 13. It says, "O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes that you may know each other and not despise each other." Okay. And incidentally, so I quoted this in 2001 at the Tory conference, just after the 9/11 attacks. Theresa May, she quoted that verse in 2018. Obviously, she did not know that I had quoted that, about 15 years beforehand. So again, Islam has a lot to say about these things, about racism, about forced marriages, relative, kin marriages. But for some reason, I'd like to know why we're doing the opposite.
Beautifully articulated. Now, let's presume that this law is enforced and it's outlawed in this country. It's still, in terms of circumvention or skirting around the law, technically I can get married and cohabitly live as a Muslim without registering my marriage. So how does the law come to effect then? So if someone gets married to their cousin but doesn't register the marriage, the government are none the wiser. So in terms of, I get the deterrent and, making it public on the sentiment that this is outlawed in this country, a bit like FGM. People can still get married without, because if it's entrenched, and we're using Bradford an awful lot because, the facts, what can't speak, can't lie. 90% I don't think this law will deter them from continuing marrying their cousins.
Well, I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel because although I did mention Bradford in 2013, I think there was a study done by Dr. Sheridan. It's published in the Lancet magazine. It's a medical journal. They looked at 13,500 babies born between 2007 and 2011 in Bradford. And 31% of those babies had birth defects because of cousin marriages. 31%, yeah, a really high statistic.
Wow.
But having said that, I think I did read somewhere, and especially I think in the paper by Patrick Nash, he's an Oxford academic, has links with Oxford, and he's written some robust papers. And I think there was a statistic that now, well, in 2023, the rates might have come down through education, right? So you talk about circumvention, I'm talking about education. So if that statistic is true, it's probably gone down to 46%, 2023, needs to be confirmed. That's good. So what the ban is going to do, it'll run in parallel to an already declining trajectory. So they'll go hand in hand.
Okay.
In that one hypothetical example, if people go out, get married and come back, circumvent the law. Or cohabit. I mean, you talked about FGM. We talked about FGM. That's should we legalize FGM on that basis? Because some families will circumvent. They'll go out, cut up their daughters, come back. No, because it's a deterrent. It'll signal, a message, a strong message that this is wrong. It shouldn't happen. And hopefully through education, then we should see further declines. Okay.
Beautiful report.
And also, I think it's also related to this tribalistic clan mentality. And again, it goes back to why has it been so prevalent? It's clan. It's tribalism, something that is anathema to the egalitarian nature of Islam and British values as well. I was at the receiving end. I did feel the heat of clan mentality actually in 2009 for the 2010 general election. So as you know, I stood for Parliament in 2005 in Bolsover, and we went through a selection process, so the Conservative selection process, in 2009 in Bethnal Green and Bow. It's not too far from here. And it was quite an open approach because it wasn't just Tory members, it was any constituent could actually vote for their Tory candidate, which was really good. So there were three of us candidates. We went for the hustings. And what really got me aghast was I think 95% of the audience was actually Bengali, right? And so we had the hustings, cross-examination with the editor of the local newspaper there. And what happened was that the person who did get selected, he was not a Bengali, but he did use some Bengali lingo just to attract. He got selected. I mean, he was half drunk as well. He looked half drunk, yes.
Wow.
So what the hell happened there? I mean, he got deselected precisely because there's something going on. My mother then asked one of the community leaders, well, what happened? And he said, well, if they had known about me, then something could have been different. So it shows the nepotism within this tribalistic mentality. And I thought to myself, God, do I want to stand in an area where we've imported failed tribalistic politics? And it relates to what we're talking about. Whereas in contrast, what we should be looking at, what voters should vote for, are policies, cross-examine candidates on policies, the quality of candidates, the delivery of argument. That's what should be basis of deciding, not, some elder told me that I'm going to vote for him. And some British parliamentarians actually went to the villages of Bangladesh in 2017 to speak to the elders so that they could speak to the voters here.
So let me just get this straight, and we're veering away here. You had British MPs that were ethnically English, are they ethnically English?
I'm not sure about the ethnicities of them, no.
So they went to Bangladesh to lobby elders from tribal villages in order to influence who members...
Absolutely, and this tribal mentality does, it is a national security issue as well, if this becomes prevalent. So it goes back to that tribal mentality, cousin marriages, forced marriages, the extreme is grooming gangs, and sort of importing tribalistic politics. So hopefully the ban will try and weaken those specific facets.
I think very cogently put, you've addressed many crises. Can I just apologise for the sort of nepotistic, tribal politics that may happen in Tower Hamlets and
Oh, no, you definitely don't apologise because it's my community.
yes,
So
but yes, I concur. It definitely does happen and has happened. But I think, we will cover Tower Hamlets politics in the foreseeable future, and I think there is a future there.
But I'm hopeful because the next generation, as they become more educated, more egalitarian, they understand what their rights are under British law and also under Islamic law. Things should change, and we don't want any more of these very, very silly politics that we have imported, unfortunately.
I think I made a pressing point in the previous episode. I'm not sure if you had a chance to. I think
Which episode was that?
The identity one, the British identity.
Oh, yeah,
yes, you
the
did reference
Imperial
it.
College
And,
guy.
yeah, the Imperial College guy. I did say that over time, albeit very maybe ebbing and flowing, ultimately, if you're anti-British or whatever you may be, unfortunately, it's sort of woven into us. If you've been born here primarily, been through the schooling system, you're inherently, it's a tenet of your identity that you are going to be British, whether you like it or not, unless you claw it out of you. And I think,
or give up a passport.
Or give up your passport. Regardless, I think you still have the element of Britishness. If you've lived here for over 20 years, it's in your DNA.
Yes.
And I gave various examples in that previous episode, and my honourable guest.
I'm glad you mentioned that it's in the DNA. As British genes, we have British genes in us.
Maybe not scientifically, but through nurture. The point I was making, and I think you said about the Bradford element, that unfortunately has come down. And to be fair, if I'm entirely honest, personally, I don't care if someone gets married to their cousin because Islamically it's not haram. What I do care about is that if you get married and one of the individuals has a genetic defect, and the child that they bring into this world is disabled or crippled in some kind of way, my heart goes out to that child. Again, God controls all matters.
But the pushback is going to be, this is God's will. That's the pushback.
No, the God didn't say run into a wall and say it's God's will.
Exactly. That's the answer.
And that is the answer.
So we have to change that mentality because it is a common thing. So, well, it's got Allah's will. And it is. Everything we do is a part of God's will. There's a hadith that says, I think the Prophet ﷺ said, that every disease has a cure.
Yeah.
Right? So we're not going to open doors to diseases when we know we have the cures. It's Allah's will that diseases are there. It's a test.
Yeah.
It's God's will that we have the tools as well. We have the cures. In medicine, prevention is part of medicine. So when you know that you're likely to increase risk of birth defects, prevent it. And we're talking about genetic testing. You don't have to go through all that palaver. Just damn well marry someone outside your community, outside your relatives. Simple as that.
And just from a neutral perspective, personally, I'm sure many people will resonate with this. You grew up with your cousins. I'm not judging anyone. You grew up with your cousins. Surely you're not going to be attracted to them.
Well, exactly. And for me personally, and this is just personal view, because it is personally abhorrent. How can you marry someone like your own sister? But this is personal.
Well, it's not sister, is it? It's cousin. There is a distinction.
Well, exactly. Yeah. But obviously, the Islamic law does allow it. But as I keep on saying, the trajectory is to move away from cousin marriage. The Prophet said it very clearly, and I invite the scholars to relook at the weak hadiths, because what it says in those hadiths, which is quite unique compared to all the other philosophers of the past and other scriptures, it does marry up with the scientific evidence. So you have to look at that, and also the scholars I've just mentioned.
Beautifully put. I look forward to reading your book. Any final thoughts?
I think the final thought will be, in the context of forced marriages, where shall I look there? Cousin marriages. Let me just take you back to 1805, where Lord Admiral Nelson, he sent out a message just before the Battle of Trafalgar. He said, England expects every man to do his duty, right? Very powerful words. If I link that to our holy book, the Quran, chapter 4, verse 135, where God does say, O ye who believe, stand out firm for justice as witnesses to God, even if it is against yourselves. So the creator of the universe, our creator, expects every one of us, whether, every Muslim, to do his duty, her duty, to call out injustice where it is. So I've mentioned a whole list, including forced marriages, cousin marriages, as well as a whole raft of things. So let us do our duty.
Thank you very much, Brother Hassan. It's been an absolute privilege, and
The privilege has been mine.
We will confer after this finishes. You've got a plethora of knowledge on various subjects, and you'll be coming on for other things. Rest assured, if you'll have us. Thank you very much. I'm just going to turn to the audience. I just want to say, we as Silent Majority, we cover very controversial topics with the intention to bring about awareness and for that to act as a catalyst for change, for better change within our communities. So, if you haven't subscribed, please join our family, join the movement, and have your say, have your comments, influence us in what we need to cover, what we need to touch on, and what we need to address as a community. We're one, we're not different. So, Pakistan has been mentioned a lot here, and we're one at the end of the day. And I'd just like to finish off with those people that are watching that had no choice in their parents being cousins, or, just purely through cultural norms have married their cousin. What's done is done. There's no point crying over spilt milk. But essentially, we need to be objective about the damage it does cause within society, particularly the health damages, alongside what Brother Hassan said about the intellectual research that's been done about kids having a lower IQ, and also just expanding. And Brother Hassan also referenced Islamic hadiths and mentioned the Quran as well. So essentially, hopefully we've addressed this topic, and we hope that from 2014, I believe you said, up until 2023, Bradford is rampant in this. The statistic has come down, and if this law is introduced and it does become legislation, or law rather than outlawed, that trajectory of information and education will sort of coincide with the deterrent, and hopefully we'll have less and less cousin marriages in our part of the world. Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, North Africa, if they want to partake in such matters, I don't really care, and I'm not going to snigger on it and say, oh, it's a wrong thing. It's like, in this part of the world, some people walk around naked, so they can equally turn around to us and say, oh, you walk around naked. So it's cultural preferences, but from a Muslim perspective, there are obvious health problems alongside other problems that it does cause within our society. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.
And can you add this as well? Insert this.
Sure.
I'd invite Labour MPs as well. I've written to my Labour MP in Slough, Tan Desi, to support Richard Holden's bill. Don't worry about the Muslim vote, because as I've explained, and through education, we'll start to realise actually cousin marriage should be banned for the sake of the next generation. So I'd implore our fellow Labour colleagues and Tories to unite on this particular issue. And final point, if I may, Brother Oli, if you have been forced to marry either your cousin or elsewhere, the default position for a Muslim should be overlook the faults of your parents, forgive, and we leave it at that. But make damn sure when you become parents, you don't force your children, because it does go against the ethos of Islam. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bringing you the conversations that matter. Thanks for watching. Join the movement and subscribe.